Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And we always have all kinds of guests who are involved in all kinds of topics in natural. Today, our topic is the name of our guest book, Healing the Thyroid with Ayurveda, Natural Treatments for Hashimoto's, Hypothyroidism, and Hyperthyroidism. Marianne Teitelbaum is a chiropractic physician, and she graduated summa cum laude from Parma College of Chiropractics in 1984, and she has studied with several Ayurvedic doctors, including Stuart Rothenberg and Vaya Ramakant Mishra, and and somebody's the recipient of the Prana Ayushudi Award in 2013. That would be Dr. Teitelbaum. And she lectures and writes extensively about Ayurvedic treatments for all diseases. She has a thriving private practice and lives near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Teitelbaum.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Now, I love Ayurveda. I've been studying it deeply since 1976, and I'm also on the Council of Traditional Medicine at Columbia Presbyterian Medical School, and one of the things that I worked very hard on was to have the name of that group called Traditional Medicine. And what we mean by traditional medicine is not what goes on in regular medicine today. We can call that mainstream, we can call it conventional, we can call it modern medicine, allopathic medicine, but when we use the word traditional, I really love to promote the concept of using it only for truly traditional healing techniques, and I would certainly say Ayurveda falls into that true traditional category.
That's exactly right. And if we want to speak a little more detailed about what traditional medicine truly means, it means that the nutrients you're going to be using are grown in nature. So for something to be truly natural, again, they have to be grown in nature. And I'm pointing this out because in America, because we're a fairly new country and we haven't discovered all of our hundreds of herbs that are lying fallow in the fields, just waiting for us to discover them, lots of the alternative practitioners are using synthetic nutraceuticals such as B-complex, L-tyrosine, and so on and so on. So many people think of these as traditional medicine, and they're definitely not that. So if anyone really wants to use a natural medicine in the United States, they would have to seek out or look outside of our country to maybe Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, which are the two traditional medicines right now, just using herbs.
Yes, that's the two that I would say. And there are other, how about just Western herbal medicine?
Yes, but, when I was first opening my practice in the early 1980s, I knew right then and there that I wanted to treat our patients just using herbs because I know that nature put those there for a purpose. We could treat almost anything using herbs, and I could find not one person to train me because there really aren't that many herbalists who are skilled in treating the very serious diseases that I'm treating, like MS, thyroid, autism, fibromyalgia, and so on. So I was forced at that time to seek, help outside the country. And I was also, like you, hearing about Ayurveda and was very fortunate in that a doctor from India who was sent to America to make the formulations for the first Ayurvedic herbal company in America, he actually sat with me for 17 years in my practice. And as we saw hundreds of patients together, he developed those formulas for me. But yes, you're right. There are some herbs that we know, but they know way more in Ayurveda. So just for the lungs alone, I might have 20, 30 herbs, or for MS alone, I might have 20, 30. We have herbs, for example, that could fix the thyroid gland, but I don't know what those herbs would be here in America, and so on and so on. So I'm really fortunate that I have access to over 500 herbs.
Right, and how about the thousands of years that they've been studied?
Yeah.
And a lot of the formulas, have been tried and true for that long. So we know how those herbs work together as well. It's a very, very advanced science.
Yeah, very advanced. Much more so than here. We don't want to be chasing symptoms around the body. So, for example, if your cholesterol's high, mainstream medicine will give you statin drugs to lower it. If you decide you don't want that approach and you seek out the advice of an alternative practitioner here in America, they would say, let's use red yeast rice, niacin, and fish oil. But when people come to me, I tell them, let's not do either. Let's fix the root cause, the reason why the cholesterol is high. It's usually sitting somewhere in the liver and the gallbladder, and let's fix the reason that the cholesterol is high and why you're not clearing it out of the blood.
Very often natural medicine focuses on tolle causum, find the cause, versus just a Band-Aid on the symptom.
Yeah, that's why when I decided to write my book on the thyroid, I had to write a whole book on it, because if your thyroid test's weak, you'll immediately be put on thyroid hormone, which unwittingly will put your thyroid into hibernation because it's no longer called upon to make its hormones. So it's not really fixing anything. So what you want to do are fix the multiple reasons why it's weak. So because there are so many, I had to write a whole book on that. And then you support the thyroid gland using some herbs. So there's a difference between just supplying the hormone, the thyroid then goes to sleep, and you still have those same underlying reasons going on that are weakening the thyroid, versus truly trying to fix it. And our bodies are fully capable of healing themselves. We just have to know how to nudge them in the right direction. So,
well, I'd like to remind you that you're listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Dr. Marianne Teitelbaum, and she is a chiropractic physician and author of Healing the Thyroid with Ayurveda, Natural Treatments for Hashimoto's, Hypothyroidism, and Hyperthyroidism. Now, why is there an epidemic, do you think, Dr. Teitelbaum, of thyroid problems in the world today?
Well, it's very easy. The thyroid gland is the only gland whose hormones affect every single cell in your body, unlike the other glands whose hormones have a much smaller influence. But then in reverse, anything that's weakening to the body will weaken the thyroid. The thyroid's like a very delicate little flower. So if you go to bed late, it just kind of wilts. Or if your diet's not the best, maybe lacking protein, it'll wilt. Or if you have a gut infection like Candida albicans yeast or SIBO, it'll wilt. So there's so many reasons why, and that's what the book talks about. So you have to address those reasons and then support the thyroid, and it just bounces right back very quickly.
Now, you threw out a vocabulary word that I know, but let's inform our listeners. You talked about Candida. A lot of people have heard of that. Please let us know what you mean by SIBO, S-I-B-O.
Both Candida and SIBO. SIBO is the abbreviation for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. In my book, I talk about why these different gut infections are rampant in our society today. It usually comes from taking certain types of pharmaceuticals. For instance, there's friendly bacteria in the intestines that prevent infection. Acidophilus, bifidonate, bulgaricum. So if you've ever taken some antibiotics or had some immunizations or you took some birth control pills, these three groups of medicines, along with others like steroids and many others, will weaken that will deplete the friendly bacteria. So as a result, the infections, there's always a little bit of Candida albicans yeast in our gut, but our friendly bacteria prevents it from overgrowing. So if those strains are wiped out, that yeast will multiply as much as it wants. The same goes for the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. When we swallow food, it goes into the stomach, and there's all this acid in the stomach for a reason. One reason is it burns up the food that we eat. But the other reason is that the food that we're taking in has bacteria on it. There's just no way that can't happen because it's in the external world. We're teeming with bacteria out here. So the way it would work is you would swallow the food, the stomach acids would kill that bacteria, and then from there it squirts into the small intestines. So nowadays, with the rampant use of what are called proton pump inhibitors, these are medicines that take away the acid in your stomach, like Prilosec, Nexium, and so forth. Now the acid is so low, so these infections from the food are allowed to run rampant also in the small intestine. So as a result, we're starting to see an epidemic of this small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, in addition to the Candida albicans overgrowth, or that yeast overgrowth, which we have seen for decades now.
Yeah, that's a really great explanation. How many people are on Prilosec? And even in the more New Age community, the constant talking about that acid is bad and only alkaline is good, that is a really non-scientific and incorrect assertion about what the natural environment is in the body.
You know, one of my favorite chapters in my book is on the gallbladder. And the way I open the chapter is I say, why am I writing a chapter on this small pouch-like organ that holds bile when this is a book on the thyroid gland? And the reason is, if the thyroid doesn't work properly, which let me tell you, it's weak in so many people, whether they know it or not. But at any rate, if the thyroid's not working properly, the gallbladder automatically won't release the bile. The two are on the same acupuncture circuits. The thyroid meridian feeds into the gallbladder meridian. So if the thyroid's weak, the gallbladder's automatically weak. And also in my book, I present the Western research that shows why that sphincter, it's called the sphincter of Oddi, in the gallbladder won't release the bile when the thyroid's weak. But at any rate, the whole chapter is devoted to what happens in the gut if you break that cycle where the food first coming in should be acid, and then in the duodenum it turns alkaline from the bile squirting in there. After the food squirts in from the stomach, it's acid. So, the food squirting in from the duodenum into the duodenum is acid coming in from the stomach, but it has to leave alkaline, or else it could burn up your gut. So when the bile squirts, it alkalinizes the digestive juices. So we need both. We don't need too much acid or too much alkaline, but it has to be balanced. So this is a beautiful chapter that explains very easily to understand how digestion works and what happens with your digestion and many other things if your bile's not flowing. So many people who have read the book said this was definitely their favorite chapter.
Well, I want to remind you that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Listen live online at nccradio.org or on iHeartRadio. For more information on today's guest, Dr. Marianne Teitelbaum, or topic, you can email us at whpc@ncc.edu. Stay tuned. We're taking a short break, and Herbally Yours will be right back.
Olivia from Washington. Laid off and trying to keep our little kids from realizing that Mommy and Daddy haven't eaten in a while.
Roger from California. I'm grateful we could afford our son's surgery. I'm nervous that now we can't really afford food.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Donna from Louisiana. The storm just hit, and we went from donating to the food bank to needing it.
Keisha from South Carolina. I've been skipping meals so my 2 kids can eat, but filling up on water doesn't really work.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And thank you for joining us. You can always join us live in the field right on Long Island. We'll be outside gathering edible and medicinal weeds. We'll also be at Naval Expo. That's coming up. You can look it up online, Naval Expo. And I will be lecturing there on opioids and CBD oil and cannabinoids. I'm actually a member of the American Nurses Cannabinoid Association, where we learn all about how to use those things effectively. I know it's like a madness out there with the CBD oil story, but if you want to know the truth, you certainly can attend. And thank you so much for joining us today on Herbal Yours, right here on WHPC and also on iHeartRadio. Our guest today is Marianne Teitelbaum, Dr. Teitelbaum, and we're talking about her book, Healing the Thyroid with Ayurveda. So in terms of Ayurveda, Dr. Teitelbaum, how would the approach to rebalancing the thyroid differ from either Western medicine or even Western alternative medicine?
Well, let me give you a few little examples. There's two basic types of thyroid patients you'll see. And the first group are people who have full-blown thyroid symptoms, weight gain, hair loss, depression, constipation, fatigue, and yet their blood work comes back normal. So they're told that nothing's wrong with them, and they leave the doctor's office feeling very frustrated and hopeless. Then there's a second group who do have problems that show up on blood work. Then they're automatically prescribed thyroid hormones, and yet their symptoms continue, and they also feel hopeless. Now, when either group decides to seek out alternative care, again, in America, there are a lot of alternative practitioners, and they've learned some of the herbs we're using, which is good. But in addition to that, they're using these synthetic nutraceuticals that I was talking about. And the synthetic, anything made in a lab, devoid of nature's influence of the sun and the moon hitting it, we call it prana. In Ayurveda, the Chinese call it chi. Anything devoid of that vibration, such as a pharmaceutical or its cousins, the nutraceuticals, will be toxic to the liver and the kidneys and have side effects. So what our approach is in Ayurveda is to first and foremost get to the root of the problem. We don't want to just give our herbs that support the thyroid gland without seeing why it's weak. And then we support it using the herbs. So that's one example. The other very big example, and this is also one of the great chapters in the book, is the chapter on Hashimoto's. And I wrote this after reading all the alternative books on the thyroid gland that are out there now. And they all say for Hashimoto's, you would support the thyroid gland with ashwagandha, L-tyrosine, iodine. They're giving all these things, B12, selenium, and so on and so on. Now, what Hashimoto's is, it's a little different than regular hypothyroid. It's where the immune system is now attacking the thyroid, and that's the problem there. So in my book, I put, what is the immune system? We have to fix it so it stops attacking the thyroid, and then we could support the thyroid gland. The immune system is the friendly bacteria in the gut, the liver, and the bone marrow. So in this modern era with all these pharmaceuticals, many of these chemicals will get into the bone marrow, and that's where the immune system cells are born. It'll disturb its function. But another very important thing that no one has addressed in their books on Hashimoto's is that what's happening in this modern era with all the pharmaceuticals, air pollution, pesticides, toxins in the food, these chemicals are heating up the liver much in the same way as when alkaline rain goes through air pollution, it becomes acid rain. Our liver is holding on to very hot toxins, and the way we can tell this is in the pulse. In Ayurveda, the doctors are trained in very advanced pulse diagnosis, where we can feel all the organs and glands. We can feel all the types of toxins, all the tissues, where those toxins are going. And you can feel in this modern era, everyone's liver is extremely hot. Now, when the liver overheats, it pushes you into autoimmune. So you'll notice people who have a history of taking a lot of antibiotics, birth control pills, lots of medications, lots of immunizations in their youth. These are triggers for autoimmune a little later in life because they're disturbing the liver, the gut, and the bone marrow. So here's the issue. When the liver's overheated, it pushes you into autoimmune. So you have to be very careful in the way you take things orally. So, for instance, many things, even our Ayurvedic herbs, such as ashwagandha, which is the main herb to support the thyroid gland, when those herbs come in, they're heating, just like nutraceuticals, selenium, vitamin D, zinc, L-tyrosine, B-complex. They're all very heating to the liver. A lot of people are saying take turmeric capsules. It's an extremely hot spice. It heats the liver too much. Others are saying there's this correlation between the liver and thyroid problems, and they're correct. So they're saying take milk thistle. It heats the liver too much in its efforts to cleanse the liver. So in my book, I warn not to take these things, which everyone is being told to take when they have Hashimoto's. And instead, I show how we give the herbs in a way that won't heat the liver through transdermal creams or these little glyceride drops, homeopathic dilutions of the herbs in water. So that's a real big difference that this book is showing than what has been written before.
And so you're using things that I would say really are more linked to traditional use. And I'd like to remind you that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Dr. Marianne Teitelbaum, talking about her book, Healing the Thyroid with Ayurveda, Natural Treatments for Hashimoto's, Hypothyroidism, and Hyperthyroidism. And you can find her at Dr. That's D-R-M Teitelbaum, TEITELBAUM.com. And thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Teitelbaum. Very interesting. So you are sticking with a lot of the ancient traditional teachings on balancing the body.
Yes, one thing I can tell you, if you go to China or India, they're not going to be using synthetic nutraceuticals, and there are reasons why. So my book will outline those reasons. It's not to say they don't have an effect, they do. But again, just like pharmaceuticals, they'll be toxic to the liver and kidneys, and they'll have some side effects. And in many cases, like in Hashimoto's, it worsens the condition.
So what is the view on starting with things such as stress reduction and a healthy diet?
I have a whole chapter on the diet in there. I have several sections that talk about stress reduction. Again, the thyroid gland is very delicate. Any stress, whether you're going to bed late, you're under stress, will weaken it. So I give all kinds of pointers and tips how to reduce the stress. There are many ways in Ayurveda, which the book will delve into.
It's interesting that in conventional medicine, many people just get something called the TSH, which is a thyroid-stimulating hormone level that is not even released by the thyroid. And then the doctor just says your thyroid is normal, even if they have a long list of possible things that would certainly make you think they have a thyroid imbalance.
You know what I love about Ayurveda? The ancient doctors who left us with their textbooks said that the body goes out of balance in 6 stages, gradually, as it works its way towards some disease you could name, some disease that would show up on modern Western allopathic diagnostic tools. So, for example, in the first 2 stages of these imbalances, these glands, let's say the thyroid's getting a little weak, but there won't be any symptoms yet. But by the 3rd and 4th stage, if you don't know to fix these things, you start having symptoms, weight gain, hair loss, maybe miscarriages, skipping menstrual cycles. And yet, if you get your blood work drawn, again, it comes back normal because the thyroid's struggling. It can still keep up its hormones, but it's having a hard time. So the blood work looks good, even though you're suffering. But then by the 5th and 6th stage, when it just gives up, then it'll show up. So the goal of medicine then should be to see what's out of balance and reverse it so that you don't find yourself in that 5th and 6th stage. The problem with modern medicine is doctors are trained to diagnose and treat disease. So that's what they're looking at. They're waiting for you to arrive in the 5th and 6th stage. And once you're diagnosed, then they have a medicine, a pharmaceutical to suppress that symptom. That's not how medicine is supposed to be practiced, but that's all we know right now in our Western world. So books like mine are coming out saying, oh, wait, there's a better way to do this. So this one concerns the thyroid gland because thyroid problems are epidemic levels around the world, not just in the United States, and someone needs to address this.
Now, it is a very widespread and has been for many years, and yet it's not well recognized about how much of an epidemic it is. It is growing more and more as this huge epidemic, and also it used to be that it was mainly women who had thyroid problems, and nowadays we're seeing a lot of men and children. Now, when you read my book, you'll see why that is. I can just quickly name a few reasons.
One thing is the thyroid gland is the only gland in the body who uses iodine. So it's programmed to use up whatever iodine comes into the body to make its hormones. Now, mercury looks almost exactly like iodine. So people who are getting flu shots, they have mercury in them. Or lots of kids had mercury in their immunizations in the early years up until about 2005 or 6. So those kids are loaded with mercury. Also, our tap water in many communities around the country have fluoride in them. Fluoride also has an affinity. It goes to the thyroid. So both the mercury and the fluoride will torture the thyroid gland. In fact, fluoride can even kill thyroid cells. So in many of those patients, I can feel, because I've been trained to, it took many years to learn this, but I could feel the heavy metal stuck on the thyroid gland. They go right there because the thyroid's programmed to take in these halogens and these heavy metals. So that's just one example, but there are many factors contributing to this. Again, too much stress, too much fluoridation of the water, too much mercury in these shots. The list of insults to the thyroid goes on and on. But the good news is, if you can identify those and fix those things, and they're not hard to fix, and support the thyroid gland, again, it just perks right back up.
So that is great. You know, we're just about out of time right here on Herbally Yours. So can you tell our listeners the best way to find you and get a hold of your book?
You know, everyone, I think 85% of books are now sold on Amazon, so you can find it very easily on Amazon. You can just put in Dr. Marianne Teitelbaum's Thyroid book on Ayurveda, and it'll pop right up. Also, it's sold in bookstores, especially Barnes & Nobles all around the country are carrying it, and many other bookstores. But I think the majority of the people are getting it on Amazon right now, and in fact, it's on sale on Amazon right now.
I think that is probably one of the biggest booksellers. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Teitelbaum. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For more information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.